This is the one time you're allowed to stick your tongue out at a priest. Except it's the opposite, because it's an act of reverence instead of an act of disrespect. Guess what we're talking about today? The best way to receive communion, on the tongue. I'm going to be taking some stuff from Spirit of the Liturgy by Cardinal Ratzinger, aka Pope Benedict, and other from the scriptures, and kind of just also my own thoughts and reflections, which ultimately, of course, come from the Catholic Church, because there's nothing new under the sun at all. In talking about why we should receive the Eucharist on the tongue while kneeling, we have to consider two fundamental things. One, just the reality of what the Eucharist is, or who the Eucharist is, I should say. Who the Eucharist is. The Eucharist is Jesus Christ, okay? And who is Jesus Christ? Second person of the Blessed Trinity. Who's the Trinity? God. We are receiving God, the creator of the universe. The creator of the universe humbled himself enough to look like a little wafer, or what looks like wine, but we know in reality is really Jesus Christ's body, blood, soul, and divinity. If he can humble himself enough to do that, I think we can humble ourselves enough to receive on the tongue while kneeling. And number two, it's the reality that we need to remember that we are both body and soul. And so therefore, what our exterior impacts our interior. We're body soul composite, which means we have a physical body, but we're also a soul. Our soul gives life to the body, animates the body. There's a lot more I could go into detail that we're not going to go into. Go look at Thomas Aquinas 101 videos if you want to get into that. But ultimately, it's just the fact that what we do with our exterior influences our interior. So the difference between receiving on the hand and receiving on the tongue, receiving while standing and receiving while kneeling, will influence my thought process on what exactly is happening. Pope Benedict, in his book Spirit of the Liturgy, says, "The body has a place within the divine worship of the Word made flesh," the Mass, "and is expressed liturgically in a certain discipline of the body, in gestures that have developed out of the liturgy's inner demands, and that make the essence of the liturgy, as it were, bodily visible." He also says that worship is one of those fundamental acts that affects the whole man, body and soul. And so we need to remember that when we're thinking, why, what's the difference? Why does it matter? Why does it matter if I receive the Eucharist on the hand or on the tongue? Why does it matter if I'm standing or kneeling? We need to remember that what we do with our exterior bodies affects how we think, and just how we think about what we're doing. Why should I receive on the tongue? Why is that the best way to receive the Eucharist? This is just kind of a disclaimer out there. The hand is the exception to the norm and wasn't actually supposed to start happening at all. It was supposed to be the tongue. It's been the tongue since the 6th century, and Vatican II did not actually change it contra popular opinion. That's just that, but the deeper, more beautiful realities are just thinking, just think about the word receiving. We say, I receive communion. I receive. It is a gift. I'm not taking, I'm not grasping. It's a gift that Jesus is offering himself to me. I must receive as a gift. So when I use my tongue to receive directly from the priest, I'm not grasping. It's obvious. Obviously this doesn't look like grasping, but like I said, when we just receive on the tongue, it's pure reception. There's nothing, I'm not picking it up and giving. It's pure reception. It's direct mediation between the priest, who's in persona Christi, and me. There's no middle ground. There's no place where I'm trusting myself. I'm trusting myself to make sure the Eucharist is going to make it into my mouth. There's none of that. It's pure trust that the priest knows what he's doing. Jesus knows what he's doing. And it keeps our hands folded, which is another thing about trust. A knight would have his hands and place them in between the hands of his Lord. And at that point you think about, my hands are placed in somebody else's hands. I can't, they got my hands. I can't do anything. I'm defenseless. So as, once again, an act of trust, saying, Jesus, I trust in you. Every time you receive the Eucharist, keeping my hands folded, putting my hands in the hands of Christ, and he's coming to me. He comes to me, I don't grasp. I'm not fighting him. I'm totally surrendering and trusting him. It's also just, it's reverence of reality. It's a sign of humility, which I'm going to talk about in a sec, but it's reverence to the reality of who it is. It's God. We don't want any middle ground. We don't want a place where, oh my gosh, the King of the universe could somehow like get on my hands, and then I'm brushing my hands around, my hands are on my face, and then all of a sudden particles of the Eucharist are on the ground. I mean, hopefully that doesn't happen, but it does. And we just don't want that to happen. We want to reverence God. We want to adore God. We want to worship him. And making any slight little possibility that he could somehow be trampled underfoot or rubbed in my eyeballs or something like that, no. We want to make sure he's reverenced properly. We want to make sure that he's not going to be spit upon or trampled upon like he already has been with the crucifixion. That's why we should be receiving on the tongue, which I'm sure for a lot of people is already a stretch. Like, I've never received on the tongue. I've also never received on the hand, ever. So, it's not being like, oh, me, look at me, oh, proud and holy, but just like, I don't know. So, already, for some people, receiving on the hand is a lot. And it's a journey, it's a process, and it's something you gotta work through to finally understand like the deepest reality of why I do it. And I'm not saying everybody needs to switch all at once, although that would be ideal, but this world isn't ideal. So that's the tongue. Now we're going to receive to why you should receive kneeling. Once again, kneeling has been around for a lot longer than standing. If you go to older churches, altar rail, everybody received kneeling. But that's just putting that out there about something that, again, wasn't supposed to actually change. The more deeper, more fundamental realities of why we should receive kneeling. Kneeling is first and foremost a sign of humility, and it's a sign it's a sign of humility, which is what? Humility is truth. The truth about ourselves and truth about God. And so understanding the truth about us as creatures before God the Almighty, whom we are receiving in the Eucharist, is acknowledging that, heck yeah, I am little and you are big. It's just humility and understanding of who God is and who we are. Going a little bit, this is also from Pope Benedict's Spirit of the Liturgy. A lot of times you'll find in the Gospels people falling to their knees before Jesus. A lot of times it's before they're asked to be healed. People will fall to their knees. It's a sign of supplication and a sign of trust in the power of God. There's also, so that's one understanding, and there are different Greek words that I don't know how to pronounce. And then there's the other understanding of just not plain old, but just adoration. It's a sign of adoration and it's a sign of worship, which is what we were doing in the Mass. The Mass is an act of worship towards God. It's us saying, you are God and I am not. It's just the understanding of who we are and who God is. The kneeling initiates a dialogue for metanoia, turning back to God, which is what healing is. Healing of our broken souls and healing of our broken souls wounded by original sin, which was an act of pride on the part of Adam and Eve, and thus all of humanity. And the worship in the liturgy is a dialogue with God about that as well. So there's falling to your knees like that, which is kind of, obviously not falling to your knees or whatever. You don't want to actually do that because you could lose your balance to hit the priest. But just kind of when you're starting to kneel, that's kind of the symbolism of falling to knees. And then kneeling in general. Your knee in the ancient world, the human knee in the ancient world when Jesus was around on earth, is a symbol of strength. So when you bend your knee, once again, it's an act of humility. You're bending your knee before somebody who's greater than you. And of course, the knights in the Middle Ages would do this to the lords and kings, etc., etc. Taking from the New Testament, from Philippians 2, 10, and 11, St. Paul says, at the name of Jesus, every knee shall bend, in heaven and on earth and under the earth. At the very name of Jesus. Just his name. If at the name of Jesus, we should all be bowing our heads here, we all should be kneeling, how much more should we be doing that when he is physically in front of us? When he is physically in front of us, we definitely should be kneeling and bowing our heads and being totally just realizing what a gift it is to receive the Eucharist. Because it's not a privilege, it's not a right that we have, it's a gift. The Mass is a gift. We can't be grasping, we can't be taking, because that's not receiving. God freely offers, we must freely receive. We must not grasp, we must receive. And then bringing them both together. Receiving, kneeling while on the tongue, is probably one of the most just safe I won't say safe, but best ways, because it's this just also really just stable. If you're receiving on the tongue and you're lower than the priest, it's better for the priest to get the host in your tongue, so we don't need to worry about him like dropping the Eucharist or the Eucharist going somewhere or anything like that. Just that's practical mindset. Just it's reverencing God. It's reverencing God. It's making sure that he is not going to be mocked again. The world already mocks God enough. And I'm not saying by receiving on the hand you're mocking God, but it's just too much of an opportunity for abuse, because somebody can just take it and then leave, or take it and then drop him. We want to reverence God in the best way possible, and the best way possible is making sure there's that direct connection between the priest and the person receiving. Okay, that might have been a little intense, but I'm really passionate about this topic. But seriously, pray about why this is the best way to receive. There's more stuff I put more references in the links below if you want to keep going there. There's some quotes, there's some articles, stuff like that. Any questions, comments, concerns, just anything, suggestions, put in the comments below. I'll do my best to respond to them. But, yes, all that being said, guys, get holy and have fun doing it.